Hello and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and tonight we are going to venture into the Twilight Zone a little bit because this is what I'm going to call one of the lost files. I did a podcast that we're now putting the finishing touches on with Landon Helms, who is a decathlete from Texas A&M. This was somewhere back before the season really got started last spring. So I'm going to call it somewhere in February. I started producing it and it got lost and shuffled. And many apologies to Landon. He's been very patient waiting for this to come out. But after many hours of searching and putting things together, we finally have it ready. So we will follow up with the Landon Helms interview. He's one of the top under 20 decathletes here in the United States. He's after last season, I believe he told me in the interview he was going to be going on his mission for the Latter-day Saints and would be coming back a couple years. So we will you'll hear that story and many other things here following up as we talk with Landon Helms. So stay tuned.
Were you just finishing up, were you just working on a different video?
Yeah, I was yeah, I never a dull moment. I've been scrambling uh today especially. um it's been a whirlwind of craziness. So pardon me for for taking a couple extra minutes. I was trying to put the finishing touches on a podcast from the other evening. So Landon Helms, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I thank you so much for taking time out of what's got to be a crazy schedule. Knowing, having worked with some multis here for the last couple years now at Vanguard, I appreciate more and more what you guys do. So it's just pretty amazing. So let me rock into our an intro here. I'm still working on a whole method of doing this smoothly. Part of my uh, charm has been to I'm thinking sometimes just to like record everything and just go, this is what dumb people do when they're trying to, do a smooth opening or whatever. Like sometimes I just get her early and I'll start talking and, leave it recording and then start talking about my guest who's coming. And then I was, my brain went the other way this time. So all of a sudden I see you there and I'm like, oh, Landon's here. Okay, let's wrap this up. And then it's like, okay, wait, how do we start the program? Well, usually I say, hello and good evening to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haines, former UCLA high jumper and long time coach now, from everywhere, from the 6-year-olds up to 70. I think my oldest athlete's 73. Worked with Paralympians, guys, girls, all ages, competencies. And tonight I'm being joined by Landon Helms, who I saw as usual on Instagram and just saw his stats and was intrigued and asked him if he would be our guest. And here he is. How you doing, Landon?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, dude, this is so awesome. So I was looking at your profile and I saw, under 20, the under 20 champion, decathlon champion, USA. Right. So in 1922, USA under 20 decathlon champion. And I remember thinking just 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known what that was, which is weird. But, I went to high school and I always played football. So we did track. And then as soon as track was over, it was football. So one of the great motivations I had was to make track season last as long as possible so I didn't have to go to spring ball. And because nobody really liked spring ball anyway. Uh, And then, when summer came, I didn't know anything about Junior Olympics because I just went into summer football. So, that was it was a really slow learning curve. I did not start dipping my toe into the Junior Olympics kind of stuff until a few years ago. And then after, I started learning about that, and I know that kind of ties into that stuff, but not necessarily. And then I started training, this business a few years back, and I started reading. I'd see it come up mostly from the Europeans. I would see under 20, under 14, under 16, under 18, under 20, and I'm like, what the heck is these? What are these? So I had to dig into that a little bit, and I found out, oh, that's just kind of their thing. And but it seems like they go both regionally, right? Which whatever the country itself is, they have their own versions of that. And then there'll be sometimes Northern European, or this or that, whatever the category is. So, but I know, and that under 20 here in the US, that's a big area. So there's lots of people in there. So tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll work our way up to you becoming the under 20. Did you always just do track and field, or did you do other sports when you were growing up?
No, so growing up, I was like my parents got me started in like flag football and like pee-wee soccer, and then like also like pee-wee basketball. And then that's basically what I did up until middle school. And then in sixth grade is when I also picked up wrestling and track.
Hmm.
And so in middle school was kind of like my let me try everything period. And
Right.
so it's like during the first part of winter, I was doing indoor track and wrestling. Then the second part of winter, I was doing indoor track and basketball. And
Right.
then in the spring, it was just track. Summer, it was track and football workouts. Fall was just football. And then did that for like 3 years. And once I got into high school, I was like, okay, let me just pick two
Yeah.
because like being able to perform on a high level, you kind of have to devote a lot more time to your craft. And so I was like, okay, football and track and field, because I grew up in a really small town in Idaho called Emmett. So it's a more farming community town, and like just like every small town, it's like football is king. And so it's
Right.
like I have an older brother who also played football. And so um I kind of was like following in his steps a little bit. Like younger brother wanted to be big brother.
Right.
Um and actually when he first started doing track, it was his freshman year. And so in middle school, we didn't have a pole vault coach. So after middle school practices, I would have to walk over to the high school. The high schoolers would still be doing practice. And then after they were done, I would hop in and just mess around, have fun with it. And then I turned out to be pretty successful at it.
Awesome. Awesome. So, what started you down the road? That this is a complex question for those of you out there that don't know much about the multi-eventers or how they train. I know here in California, you can do the decathlon as a high schooler, but only at certain events. Like I believe they hold one at Arcadia, the big invitational in April. And then I don't think it doesn't exist as far as the, California state meet, anything like that. It's not offered. It's not an option. In California, for instance, you can't throw the javelin at the high school level because, we're Californians and you would just be wandering around and people be getting hit by them. So even if you roped off the area, guys walking along, look at their cell phones, so no jav and no decathlon. And so, you know, you don't get exposed to that unless you go to Junior Olympics, right? And then I don't know that if they even do that officially, if there's a watered down version. I know one of my athletes, heptathlete, hope wannabe, does the pentathlon in the summer. I think it's just the pentathlon, right? At the Junior Olympics. Do they offer that?
I don't know if they change it like based on the age group, but I
Mm-hmm.
know that at least for the 15, 16, 17, 18 year olds, they do a full on decathlon.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, yes, it is a simplified version where it's like like how they have like the associations meet, then the regional meet, then the
Right.
national meet for USATF. So really you just get to bypass association meet and just do one at regionals, and then that qualifies you to nationals. And
Right.
so what actually got me kind of interested in the decathlon is so it's like growing up doing a whole bunch of these different sports and growing up in the country where my family grows sweet corn and pumpkins. And so it's just like working all the time, always doing something, whether it's bucking hay for some family friends of ours or irrigating, laying pipe, all that other
Right.
sort of stuff. And so just like doing like one or two events to me seemed just really boring.
Right.
Uh, and I had heard a little bit about the decathlon, but I really started to learn more about it the winter of my sophomore year of high school, because that's when I found out I had a stress fracture in my left foot, specifically in my navicular.
Hmm.
It went basically halfway through my bone, and so that was also during like right as COVID was coming on. And so right as COVID was coming on, I was able to get my first surgery where they put a screw across my foot.
Yeah.
Then a little bit later, they put a second screw in my foot. And then a little bit later again, I had a third surgery that where they put just like a this injection into the top of the stress fracture to kind of put like a protective cap over
Hmm.
the top of it. And so me always like on the go, 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 just always doing something like when COVID shut everything down. And on top of that, me not being able to run because I was in a boot,
Right.
uh, I was like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do with my life right now? Um, and so I asked the doctor if it was okay if I like threw shot and threw disc, because since it was on my left leg, it's like that's not the foot that would be like
Right. You're
leaning.
pushing off your right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so he was like, yeah, that's fine as long as you don't put a whole bunch of excessive weight on it. And
Yeah.
so slowly progressed out of the boot into shoes and started to throw more. And then a part of my recovery also was doing long jump because it's essentially pole vault, but it's not as hard on your body per se.
Right.
Um, and then I already had my background in the 110 hurdles and pole vault because those were the two events that my dad did in high school. He grew up in another small town in Idaho, more in central Idaho called Minico.
Okay.
And so that's what he did in high school. And so again, little brother wanted to be like big brother or like son wanting to be like dad. Uh, I just did them because they seemed interesting and they were fun.
Yeah.
And so that kind of led into, okay, well, if you've done shot, if you've done disc, if you've done long jump hurdles, the 100,
Yeah.
uh, the 400 and pole vault, I mean, you're only really missing the 1500 and jav. And jav was illegal in Idaho, but they just reinstated it this year.
Wow. Okay. Good timing.
Like, what have I
Huh.
got to lose?
Right. That's interesting because, to be a successful vaulter and a long jumper, my belief is you got to have some speed. So that doesn't hurt, right? So the overriding thing amongst all of those, I keep realizing more and more is speed. So I'm assuming you have to be relatively fast because you got to run your 100, you got to run your, hurdles, right? You got long jump, you got pole vault, to a smaller extent, the jav, wouldn't be bad to have some speed on your approach there, right? Got to run a 400, is that right? 100 and a 400. Uh,
Yep.
yeah, it's grueling, what you're required to do. Even I know I know the trade secret is that nobody really trains for the 1500 that you guys I don't know how you mix that in because I've been watching it now personally and I know and I've talked with enough guys who are like, yeah, we just kind of try to get that out at the end. How do you train for it without maybe sacrificing your success in some of the other ones because they're more pure speed oriented, right?
Uh,
But man, it is an amazing list, of things that you did. Are you when you played football, what position did you play? Just as a quick aside.
in middle school, I was more of like a running back slash like linebacker,
Hmm.
just because I matured a lot earlier than everybody else. So I was just like the big brute kid.
Right.
And then in high school, went more wide receiver and still like outside linebacker. But I always wanted to try like being safety or like corner. But
Yeah.
because I'm so much faster than everybody else, they were just like, we need you at more of like a speed position.
Yeah. Outside backer makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was a free safety, but as comes up often on the show, I put Tom Brady's you know, marks at the combine to shame. He was It was like, or actually, I made his look better. He was, like a 5'2" or something. I don't know. I was like five flat, and I played free safety, and so all the guys would be like, "I thought you ran track." I'm like, "No, I was a jumper, man. I got no speed." Okay, so Landon, you went along in high school. Now you got to the under 20 championship. So as you're, let's just jump to your senior year. What were the events that you were doing since you couldn't do the decathlon as a track and field athlete in Idaho?
I was doing the 110 hurdles, pole vault, long jump, and the 300 hurdles.
Okay. Now that seems to be pretty, I haven't asked this question. I've just assumed it, but I'm assuming in every state, the max is 4 events.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I
at
know
least
that
to my knowledge.
it's here in California too, but I assumed that was the case, and because I've always heard people talk about four, um, it does in some time in ways it seems kind of silly, but I I was very untalented, so I just did one. Nobody ever. I always tell my kids that too. They go, so, Mr. Haynes, you ever do anything else? I'm like, no. they never they never came to me and said, we need you to do this. In high school, I did a little pole vaulting, but once I got to UCLA, I was like, oh no, we got people to handle those other things. You're good. You just go high jump. Whereas you with some major talent, I'm sure there's always people asking you to do other stuff. So how did you do in those four events in Idaho? That kind of a slate, getting to state and all that.
Well, I don't think I lost a single event that entire school year.
Mhm.
And my whole goal, like through high school, was the overall state record, like the state meet record, was like 1408, set like 40 years ago.
Mhm.
And like my whole goal, like ever since I was a freshman, was I want to break that record. And so in the prelims, it was an illegal wind, but I ran 1367,
Nice.
which which is like four tenths of a second faster. And then I come back the very next day and I ran 1369, which put me, I think, top five in the nation my senior
Right.
year. Uh, I obviously won pole vault. I won long jump, and I won the 300-meter hurdles.
So you won all four events at state.
Yep.
That's awesome. Wow. So I would imagine, you know what your problem is. Like, if you're sitting there listening, you're thinking this kid has no problems, can't have any problems. The problem is that you were born too early before NIL started. Because I would picture right now, like a bidding war, ensuing over, brand where Landon Helms, where's he going to go, right? Because they're going to pay money to get you on the team and have you win as many events as they can for you, right? And Texas A&M is in the SEC. Is it this? Is it the same for track as it is for football?
Yeah.
Texas A&M?
We're in the SEC.
You're in the SEC, so I mean the SEC is the big dog, both football to very maybe not even a lesser extent. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, what did everybody talk about? If it wasn't the Big 12, Kansas and teams like that, you still had Kentucky's SEC. You had SEC basketball, right? And then all the way through the 80s, even when I was at UCLA, as good as we were, we always heard about LSU, Arkansas, right? Here we are again in the heart of the SEC.
Yeah.
Herschel Walker was a tailback for Georgia, Heisman Trophy winner, and he ran the 100. So you have great athletes. Bo Jackson from Auburn ran the 100, right?
Yep.
So you have a tremendous, legacy there in all the sports. I mean, the SEC conference is just kicking everybody's butt. And, when it comes to big time football now, they're talking about now that the Pac-12 is dying, their last breaths here, my beloved Pac-12. I can't believe in my lifetime I'm talking about watching UCLA play in the Big Ten. It just doesn't compute. Um, it's just bizarre. But man, you're right there, at this time when all of a sudden, this the NC2A has just opened the door, to make money as an undergraduate, for all those years for people out there that really haven't been paying attention. The NC2A and all these major universities have made all kinds of money on the backs of young student athletes like yourself and, like myself back in the day, yourself to a greater extent because you're a better athlete, but and you're basically, you guys sell tickets. When you think about it, what are we selling tickets to? We're selling the tickets to big meets. Now the only reason that you guys don't make bigger money is because we haven't sold tickets to television contracts, right? But I'm willing to bet the SEC is probably better about that. I know when I was at UCLA that they filmed some of our meets and got them out. But I'm also, without even knowing, before you answer, my guess would be that the SEC is doing a better job of televising track and field, just because it can be such a huge marquee thing when it's competed at a high level. And you've got just, what does the SEC do? They compete. They're not just going to show up, right? They're not going to go, oh yeah, we do track and field too, but our big things are football and basketball. You can kick our butts. No, you guys are going to show up and you're going to represent, right? You're going to get the best team you can. There's going to be money backing them. They're going to be trained well, and it's going to be a show. So I just see that as a huge win-win. So
I
you
feel
get
the
there
difficult
now.
thing.
Go ahead. Sorry, I rambled.
You're all good. I feel like the difficult thing about like televising the track meet is just they go so long.
Yeah.
And it's like typically you have like one or two maybe live streams, and it's like, okay, we're gonna show all the running events whenever they're running
Mm-hmm.
and when they're not running, and occasionally we'll show you one or two little bits and pieces of the field events
Right.
where it's like, even if it's like in the middle of a 3K, and it's like, oh wow, we want to watch people run around the indoor track like 27 times or something like that.
Dude, you are so preaching to the choir.
It's like
But
it's like I love the distance runners. They deserve more praise than what they get, but they're just not entertaining.
only in the steeplechase and only if they fall over one. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
No, we've talked about this many times. I don't know how many laps and how many minutes it is, but when the commentators are going, so Bob, what are you having for dinner later? Your daughter's still getting a B in biology? I mean, when they're getting tired and they can't think of anything to talk about, I'm like, dude, they just got to cut me loose. I'm telling you, Landon, give me a truck and give me all the cameras. And I'm going to sit in there and I'm going to go camera one. Okay. Give me the shot. The 100's about to start. I mean, we both know track and field, 100 meters, 4x1. Those are glory events, right? I mean, every track meet, every dual meet, which, is becoming a lost art form now. But, I grew up on dual meets in high school. And then at UCLA, when I was there, it was still a big deal. We still have the UCLA USC dual meet every year. What opens the dual meet? 4x1. What closes a dual meet? 4x4. You got big events. The sprints have always been more glamorous. Back in '84, when the Olympics were in LA, before this next time in '28, Carl Lewis was one of the main draws, of course. 100-meter, 200-meter, 4x1 relay, and the long jump. And so yeah, they don't give a fair shake to everybody else, but at the same time, I don't know, man. We just need someone with some passion, somebody that's got the guts to just stand up and go, "Hey, man, I can make this exciting." I mean, if you can give me a truck full of cameras, okay, I'm a golfer and I love watching the Masters every year from Augusta. I mean, beautiful course, unbelievable golf. I'm a huge Jack Nicklaus fan, Tiger Woods. The drama, the place. I know every hole like the back of my hand. I've never even been there. Yeah, it's a bucket lister for sure. But if you can take golf, which even at the Masters can be kind of boring, if you're just following guys around and you're like, okay, let's go to Tiger. Where's Tiger? Oh, he hit it into the trees. So you got 5 minutes of him looking for his ball in the trees. They usually will cut away. They'll come back. What did he decide to do? Blah blah blah. They're smart enough to do that. Someone chips in for eagle, right? Oh, we're over here on what's the hole? The 13th and the 15th on the back nine in Augusta. On 13, so and so hit it over the water, and he just drained a 35-footer for eagle. You're gonna see it. Guy could be in dead last. You're gonna see that putt, because they're like, hey, we're watching the Masters, and that's a great putt. So give me the truck, man. Give me the truck with all the cameras on all the events. And I'm that guy going, hey, Okay, let's go. We got the start of the 100. Yeah, that's our featured event. And hello, it's over in 11 seconds. So, I'll give you a brief overview of who's favored, and you probably have a little show for that, right? And you said these top three guys, this guy played football, blah, blah, blah. And then they run it, and you follow them through, high fives, there's the marks. And then guess what? Something else is going on. You and I both know this. While
Yeah.
that was going on, here comes a guy pole vaulting over, a new school record. And here's a guy over here throwing a shot. And here's somebody over here doing this. And it's a three-ring circus. So you just need someone that understands that it's a three-ring circus and that there's drama everywhere. And that if you are smart enough and I know they have production meetings. I know they have people that sit around and do this stuff, right? It should be an easy gig. Like you're saying, they do it that way. They've been doing it that way, and it's a travesty. It's like, can we get someone in there that understands that it's an incredibly what do we want to call it? A choreographed perfectly for drama and things that are always going on. I mean, if anything, it should be one of the most exciting telecasts that you can come up with, because you can just, if you're skillful about it, you can just be like, oh man, okay, here comes Barshim, for his first attempt at 7.6, and he runs up and jumps. And then you go over here, and then you come back because Bondarenko's got to take his attempt, and then you go over there, and then you go watch Landon over there in the pole vault, and you come back, and it's all the time. It seemed to me that time would just fly. You'd have nothing but fun things to talk about. And then every once in a while, like, you know what? We got to take a commercial break and pay for all these great athletes. I'm amazed at how crappy a job after all these years that they do with it. And here we are, Olympic year, great drama, just ready to unfold, right? You got all these great athletes. Some of them have been training 10, 12, 15 years. Who knows how long some of these guys training. They get into their late 20s, they're still trying to make Olympic teams. I was one of those. I know what that's like. So, aside from all that, you're in college now. You're at University of Texas A&M, or Texas A&M University, I guess is the way you say it. And you won the under 20 back in 22. This is 24. What year are you in? And because you mentioned COVID, so I'm sure COVID kind of screwed things up. So what year are you in, and what's going on with you right now?
Well, so COVID wasn't while I was in college. And
Okay.
so,
That was a
uh,
high school injury you're talking about. Okay.
yep. So I'm currently a sophomore in college right now, uh,
Okay.
majoring in sport management and doing a double minor. On top of, uh, I have a part-time job working for 12th Man Productions, which they do all of like the post-production work where you see like on the school's like athletic social medias, like all like the cool highlight reels and
Nice.
whatnot. Like I go and like record some of that and
That's awesome.
possibly edit some of that as well.
Hmm.
Um, and so some of the goals for this year are to obviously make it to the national meet this year.
Absolutely.
Because last year fell short. My first HEP was this past weekend, had some great events and had some
Less
uh,
great.
pretty poor events. And I would say that one of my worst events has to be high jump, which
Really?
is your absolute best event.
Right. Yeah, it's a high pointer, right? That's one you kind of need to do well in because it's a big swing event, I've always heard. I don't know how that works out, but so you got high jump in there. Let's talk about that. Oh, I wanted to go back. You're under 20 then? You won that while you're still in high school? Is that how that works out? Or was that as a freshman at
That was between my senior year of high school and my freshman year
right.
of college. And
Okay.
actually, in that summer span, I won the Nike Outdoor National Championships for the
Mhm.
decathlon. And then like 2 days after that, I competed in the open pole vault, got second by one miss, even
Oh,
though even though I pole vaulted higher than what we won at
yeah.
during the decathlon. Then that very next week is when I competed at the U20 USA Championships back in Oregon. So I did two decathlons in the span of 1 week. I don't
Oh,
recommend that. My calves were like seized up for a month
right.
afterwards after doing like two 1500s, especially
Yeah.
with doing any 1500-meter training before
Oh,
that. And then later that summer at the USATF Junior Olympics, I won the decathlon. Then later that week, I won pole vault for the 17 and 18-year-olds, and I got second in the 110 hurdles. And that was actually the first 110 hurdle race I lost that entire year.
Wow. Wow. And so that's an amazing. So 17, 18. All right. Now, you said that you wanted to make nationals. When you're talking nationals, that's not NC2As, is it? Is that US nationals, like everybody
No, NCAA nationals.
NCAA nationals? Okay, because I know there's both there's NC2As, right? So
Uh-huh.
we're talking about the same thing, right? Just NC2A finals or NC2A nationals, either way you talk about it.
Yeah.
It's finals, right? Then you bring in all the old guys that are elites now, right? Then there's still a US nationals also. Am I right? Somewhere along the line. Depends on the
Yeah,
Olympic year.
but I feel like since we're in an Olympic year, it's just considered trials.
Yeah, yeah. They're not going to do it this year. But I think on the other years, it's not an Olympic year. You would have a US nationals. So you have
Yes.
national championships, right? And everybody has those. How it works into your schedule is something else. It might still have the US indoor nationals, but not the outdoor. Okay. And then so the big questions are you've got your nationals for college this year. And then have you already qualified for the trials? That's the big question. You got a
No,
mark that's good enough. So how far are we from that? That's the next big question. How many points?
I actually don't even know what the qualifying mark is, but I'm assuming it's gonna be more like 82 to 8400 points.
Right. And what is your current record on your decathlon score?
Like 7200.
72. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a work in progress. And so there's lots of work to be done. Now, the
Yes.
history of the decathlon is, yeah, I remember looking back. I don't know if you've done your history. First of all, the Americans used to dominate the decathlon for a long time, long, long time, all the way up through Bruce Jenner. He
Yep.
was one of the, Olympic record holders and all that. Then from 80, 84, 88, one, two or three of those Olympics was Daley Thompson from Great Britain, who was only 5'10", short little stocky dude. But he was really fast and he was a great technician. He did all the events well. He was in a great battle over all those years with a guy named Jürgen Hinkson from West Germany, who was like a foot taller than he was. Jürgen Hinkson was like 6'7", this tall, lanky, West German. And so those two were the ones on the scene for a long time. And I think that ended up in 88. And then starting in 92, I remember we had the Dan and Dave thing that went on here. That one year we had two really good guys. And I think it was Dan O'Brien and Dave Johnson, I want to say,
Yep.
something like that. So Dan O'Brien no-highted in the pole vault. And that was
Yep.
it. He was done, just withdrew. And all the hopes turned to Dave. And I think Dave got the silver. So that's about all I remember. I went through a period where I wasn't really paying attention to big track and field, which I'm ashamed to say, but I would pay attention like every 4 years. I remember the Michael Johnson years. I remember watching Charles Austin win the high jump. I've seen spots, but I wasn't as invested in what was going on. So with the decathlon, man, the thing that impresses me about you guys, Landon, is, and then now finally having coached it, like I've coached all the jumps, I've coached the vault, so that gets me four, but only two of which would you do or no, three, high, long, and pole vault are all in the
Yep.
decathlon. So for my decathletes, I have been able to help them with at least three of their events, and but watching you guys train is amazing because it's been a while. When I was at UCLA, I saw a great decathlete named Jimmy Connolly, who was ranked number one in the world. One of those Olympic years, I want to say 92. It's either 88 or 92. And he ended up breaking his leg filming a pole vault commercial for Pepsi or something and was done. snapped his femur or something. It was just like one of those things, like had an accident and, I don't know if it was career over right then, but it was definitely for that year. And that was just incredibly bad timing because he was the number one ranked, in the US and one of the tops in the world. Jimmy Conley, one of my UCLA teammates, his mother, Maria, or not, I'm getting that wrong. His sister's name was Maria. His mother's name, I cannot remember, but the mom and dad were both Olympians. So here's this guy that's a great athlete for us. And everybody's like, oh, Jimmy Conley. And then you find out, oh, dad was like an Olympic medalist and mom was an Olympic medalist. They were both in different events, from different countries, I think, have these kids who are both just strapping, unbelievable athletes. You're like, genetics in action, right? So Maria was like 6'3" and played volleyball at UCLA. She was great, but anyway, long story short, great, heritage in the US decathlon, right? And then, but watching you guys work, I remember watching Jimmy and I remember watching some of the decathletes, and I was always amazed because you just didn't get to talk to them for very long because they were always doing something. They sit down next to you and say, hey, we're going to come over and high jump when you're done. I say, okay. And then they go off running somewhere else and they're over there throwing the shot, and you're not really watching them. So I still get a little bit of that, even at Vanguard, which is a small NAIA college out here, but they're always doing something. And then to be the coach, quote unquote, the coach of the multis, that's out of my skill set. I mean, maybe I could start messing with that, but trying to lay out the training plan for that, like, I don't even want to know. It's like, okay, you guys need some sprint work. We need to do some speed agility. You got to work on such and such an approach. You got to throw. You got to lift. You got to do your, like you were talking about. I mean, I think now things have got to start changing. Like, how about some more recovery, Landon? Especially when you do two decathlons within a seven-day period, right? You got to master recovery, right? Holy
Well, I
crap.
feel like that really comes down to how dedicated is the athlete to performing at their highest level. Like for me, I obviously have like my own foam roller here in my apartment. I also invested into a TENS unit to like whenever I get like really sore and like really achy and like have like these like tight knots to like help relax that out a little
Uh,
bit with foam rolling out. And then I also have a pair of recovery boots that I bought myself for
right.
after practice when I'm just going and like looking through film, just laying in bed. I'll throw those on, set it for like 40 minutes,
Yeah.
to like pump everything out. So then I feel good for the next day. And like right after practice, it's like today actually was a perfect example. Me and the other decathlete here, Blake, we got done after everybody else. And
Hmm.
then we show up to the training room and they're about to lock up. And I'm just like, can you please give me like 5 minutes to go sit in the cold tub? It's
Yeah.
like I just need a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, our schedules are really hectic. It's
Right.
like it's like not only just being a student athlete, but being a student athlete and a decathlete. And then it's like, okay, well, that just covers school and sports. I mean, I still want to have a personal life. I still want to
Sure.
have a social life. I have other endeavors that I want to pursue.
Yeah.
And it's like, you understand adults and how like you grew up and them saying, "Ah, there's never enough time in the day." Yes, we understand that.
Right. Man alive. Yeah. And recovery, like you said, is huge. So explain to me, you threw a term at me that I think I know what it was. When you said boots, are the boots related to the same thing you're talking about with ice? Are those like those cold boots that you put your lower legs in and they get really cold, or is that something else?
No, this is something else. So it hooks up to this like little box that's kind of like an air compressor. And so what it does is it squeezes starting from your foot all the way up your leg, and it has like different chambers. So it's to help try and push the lactic acid
Mhm.
and like other stuff out of your legs. Here, I actually have them right here if you want me to show you one.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that.
So it's got this tube that
Uh-huh.
you hook into the like the compressor box,
Right.
and then uh
Both legs go in there or just one?
no, so there's two sleeves. This
Okay.
just goes on one of the feet. It has a zipper where you can just slide your leg in, and then there's different chambers, and so it just pumps up, lets the air out, and then pumps it up again to
Hmm.
kind of like simulate a flush, and
Right.
how uh like they would just like move like the muscle and like the lactic and like all the other stuff that's in your muscle and just like move it up and like get it circulating so it
So
doesn't just sit and become stagnant.
right. Right. So is it air pressure or water pressure?
Air pressure.
Air pressure. Okay.
So it's
Uh,
like I take that with me to meets, and so like typically I'm doing more. Typically I do like 4 events every single meet.
sure.
So like this weekend I'm doing pole vault, shot put, long jump, and hurdles. And so uh like as soon as we're done, I'll throw those on after like my cool down to try and just really get my legs feeling good. And I've noticed that it's made a big difference in how I feel the next day.
Nice. Yeah. Dude, I'm so jealous. I wish I'd had one of those at high school meet, my or state meet, my senior year. I had really bad shin splints. I don't know if that would have helped, but
I
anything.
don't think they'll help with shin splints, but
No. Oh, too bad. Yeah, I was 3 aspirin a day and I woke up spitting up blood sometimes. I've told these stories before. And then, I didn't know about the knees over toes guy and we hadn't learned yet about, heel walks and all that stuff. This is like dark ages back in the early 80s. So um my freshman year at UCLA, I still had problems with my shin splints. And then my sophomore year, they started teaching us tibialis anterior raises. And, once I started putting weights on those, I would dangle a weight around, like a belt through a loop, 10-pound weight, eventually like 25-pound weight, and just start doing those raises and, doing figure eights and all that. And then my shin splints went away. So that was a good thing. So I always I tell that to my kids now. Kids are lazy, but like, yeah, you'll get motivated as soon as you get to a place where you really want to jump well and your legs are killing you and you can't. But the other question that I had, really brief one, is when you're doing that, do you elevate your legs above your heart? Because we were told, like when I iced after I iced my knees religiously, even though I never had knee problems when I was jumping at UCLA, especially, and I would put my feet up and put the ice bags on my knees and then, lay back so that my heart was below my feet, so that helps you to get some of the swelling out quicker because your heart's got to pump blood uphill and it's not as good at it, right? So I'm wondering if you do the same when you're using those boots,
I've done both. I haven't done it enough of both ways to like really tell the difference.
right?
But I'm assuming that like how you were saying like it's harder for the heart to pump blood uphill. So I'm
Right.
assuming that it'll also help with
Sure.
flushing more stuff out.
That would be my guess, I would say. But hey, that's we call it. I've been trying to coin this term, and I think some others had did it before me. I don't know if I happened to read it and it got stuck in my head. But I tell the kids every day we're in the lab, quote unquote. When we're out there jumping. So I'm like all it seems like I am is just like the mad scientist because I'm in the middle of it going, okay, I don't know how to fix what you're doing wrong. I know what it is. I know what you're doing wrong, and I've got many drills for it, but I don't know which one's going to work. So we're just going to start going through it because, I want you to drive your knee across. You're driving it that way. So we're going to try this drill, and then sometimes it can be, picking an arm style or something because some people literally run up to the bar and have no idea what they're going to do. And I'm like, I was taught early to gather.
That's me.
Yeah. Well, hey, we'll talk. We'll do some work. I got all kinds of stuff for you. But some people just they either didn't have a coach that did that or, says, "Hey, I happen to be a little bit more flexible than most in that I've studied so many arm styles over the years. Like most people when they watch Fosbury jump, for instance, I remember this in high school, but I remember the first time I saw a film of Fosbury, I was like, man, that is just weird. I'm like, and everybody saw those films. I was, geez, in 76. he won the Olympic gold in 68, right? Redefined high jumping as we know it, jumped off his, landed on his back. Of course, they didn't used to do that because they used to land in sawdust and sand and dirt, so nobody was flying over the bar and landing on their back. If you watch any of those circus films they have, people would run up and jump off one foot and do some weird motion in the air and then land on that same foot in the dirt, and you're looking at him going, oh my God, I think that guy jumped like 6'4", and he didn't even, land on his back. So, he had the luxury of these great giant foam pits and just running up and, doink goes over in the air. And you're like, wow, he jumped 7'4", which is amazing. And the way he got off the ground, I mean, I have literally taught thousands of jumpers in my lifetime now. It's got to be in the thousands. And I have only coached two people that take off with their arms the way he does, with that weird reverse and drop the inside and all that. And my personal conclusion is that you had better be really tall, really fast, and really thin, or you're not getting off the ground with that style. Because I was pretty tall, kind of thin, and I had pop for a white guy. I could not get off the ground doing that style, So when I see somebody do that, my first instinct is, oh my God, stop immediately, because I just haven't seen it be successful with a lot of people, quote unquote. There are a few, but now I'm starting to pick up the single because I was just fascinated by it for years. And I keep watching going, okay, how are these Europeans jumping so high? They don't really jump. They just run off the ground, and I started studying it finally instead of going, I just don't understand it because I've got a background in biomechanics. So I'm like, oh, let's take a look at it. So anyway, the lab idea for me, for you would be on the recovery side. Yeah. Do like a little, somehow you could copy down your data from night to night, like how long was I in there, and then, do a little experiment with yourself. You could do it based on how you feel the next day, how much you worked that particular day, right? How did the recovery go? But man, talk about a lot of things on your plate. I'm just, I'm thinking about the training, like you said, going to school. That's not easy. And then notice the one thing in there, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening again, we're speaking on Raise the Bar to Landon Helms. He's the under 20 champion back in 2022, and he's now currently in the decathlon, and he's currently competing at Texas A&M. And we're talking about, recovery and this and that. The one thing I didn't notice you say was anything about sleep. You said training, you said school, you said social life, and you listed a bunch of stuff. And the one thing I didn't hear was sleep. And I know, and based on what you're doing, that's a huge endeavor, right? So how many hours are you getting? And if you're falling way short, what are we gonna do about it?
On average, I get between 7.5 to 8 hours per night.
That's pretty good. That's way better than I
Typically,
get.
typically I'm in bed by like 9:30,
Hmm.
going to bed at 10, and then I wake up at 6 o'clock every morning.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. 6 o'clock is pretty good. I would get to bed later and then struggle to get up. I don't know. You could probably tell this story because you're remembering it earlier. I can tell the story of, I remember football and I remember two-a-days in high school. And I remember those were pretty grueling. Okay. I do remember plenty of times after the first 2.5 hour practice in the boiling sun, going across the street on the way home to the Thrifty Mart and buying like a huge jug of punch or something liquid and just almost downing the whole thing in one swallow, right? And just like, because you're so thirsty and doing that, getting home, eating, and then out, done, out cold. And fortunately, you set the alarm. It wakes you back up. You're like, oh God, I got to go back for another practice, And I remember those were pretty grueling, right? But track and field was never like that. Track and field practice was just like, oh, you went after school. We went for an hour and a half. Sometimes we jumped. Sometimes we bounded up and down the bleachers. We lifted a little. This is early 80s, and our weight room was a travesty at Millikan High School where I went. So we didn't spend a lot of time in the weight room. And I just don't remember practices being that hard. Man, when I got to UCLA that freshman year, man, they just started pounding on us. All I remember was, oh, you got to be done with all your classes by 2 o'clock because practice starts at 2:30 or 3. And you showed up and it was like, oh my gosh, we got to work. we were running cross country courses and we were lifting weights and we were doing all that stuff. And I'm telling you, man, I would get home, and after I did the same thing as you did, you close down the weight room. I actually really enjoyed the weight room. And then, climb up the hills of Westwood, which is beautiful, by the way, but you get all the way up to the dorms and eat some dorm food. When I got back into the room, man, it was tough to keep your eyes open and get any studying done, as I remember. But you had your door open, you had, people coming by. That's also made it impossible for me to study. But you would do those things. And, but I remember waking up. Well, that was not so wonderful. And I still had to do it because we had to have early classes, even as a kinesiology major. Like I said, they said you had to have all your stuff done by 2. So when I signed up for classes, it was like, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and I'm stumbling off to funny thing story. My name's Haines. So the lecture hall that I went to was Haines 29 at UCLA, is in the Haines building. And my number in high school as a free safety was number 29. So I'm like, oh, this is the greatest room ever. This is perfect for me. Man, I used to fall asleep every day in that class because, first of all, it was 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 days a week for an hour and a half. Second of all, it was economics, which not the most exciting topic, taught by Professor Allen, who, when I went up to ask him some questions after one lecture, had the most bloodshot eyes I've ever seen on a human being. I was like, I forgot my question. I'm looking at this guy going, dude, you need more sleep than I do. And then I had those trail off notes. Have you ever had those where you're taking notes and your hand just trails off because you fell asleep? And then you wake up with a whiplash because you're falling
Yeah.
asleep. Oh my God. I used to take notes like that. And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to cut out the middleman. And instead of getting myself up, eating a couple bowls of cereal in the dorms, and trudging all the way across campus to this lecture and falling asleep, I think I'm just going to stay in bed. So I stopped going to econ, uh, which is not recommended for you young athletes out there. But I was always a good test taker. And I did, if you do go to college, these are some tricks that you've probably learned there. Do they have a student union where you can buy the lecture notes?
No.
Oh, dude. Okay. This is a great story. I'm
But
getting,
um for the most part, I mean, typically if you have a good professor, they just put the lecture notes up on like your Canvas, which is like our student dashboard that we have
uh,
on our laptops. So it's like technically you don't necessarily need to even get out of bed to access the lecture
really?
note.
Wow, that would have been nice. Well, they didn't have that. It only cost me $8, which back in 1982 was probably more like 30 or 40 now. But I remember, well, to make a long story short, I got an A on the first midterm. It was pretty easy. There was just a couple simple mathematical relations that they taught us, and I'm pretty good at math. Second one, a little bit more theoretical, not as much math, and I got like a D. So I had an A and a D on the 2 midterms. I think I was sitting at about a C minus, somewhere in there. And fortunately, it was my last final when we took the final, and I'd already taken my other ones, and I had 2 days to study. And I'm looking at my notes with the trail offs, and I was falling asleep, and then I stopped going, tried to read the textbook, and that just put me to sleep. I mean, you want to fall asleep at night after your workout? I recommend economics textbooks because I was out cold in 30 minutes, like done snoring. So I'm like, this is not going to work. I can't even study. I can't power study this stuff. I can't last. So I went to the student union and I was standing there. I'm looking at the lines and I'm like, what are those? Those lecture notes? I went over, I'm standing there looking up and I see Professor Allen, Econ 1, $8 for it's only, the quarter system is only 10 weeks long. So I'm like, okay. And man, those notes were wonderful. They were organized and they had like great, graphs and charts and like this and that. And I'm like, oh, this is way better. So I studied that. I think I got there's a huge chart on the final with all these, columns and numbers and everything. And I got all of it right. And I think I pulled a B minus in econ when I went in with a C on so I think I must have got an A or an A minus on the final. So I was like, yeah, it's like, that's my cheat code. But it sounds like Landon, they just give it to you for free. It's kind of annoying. But anyway, they didn't do that for us there at UCLA. You had to find out everything the hard way, which is the way I learned most of my lessons. That's a whole nother story. So what is the plan now, Landon, for you? Do you have Olympic dreams? You're 1,200-ish points away. Do you have a plan of inside of 10? I mean, in some ways it sounds to the layman, if someone's out there listening, they're like, wow, that sounds like a lot of points, right? And it is, but when you break it down over 10 events, it seems a little smaller, right? So over 10
Yeah.
events.
And especially when I did set my PR, I had an absolutely terrible day in pole vault because like I'm a 520 jumper and I
Mhm.
jumped 440 on the day.
Wow.
Uh, that was that was just a really bad experience. Shot put, I'm a 13 plus guy, and I threw like 10 something,
Mhm.
and then javelin. Still trying to learn javelin since it was illegal in Idaho. Uh,
Right.
so actually, right now, I think my discus PR is further than my javelin PR, which is
Really?
embarrassing to say,
Right.
but so far this year, things are looking a lot better.
Yeah.
So it's
Whoa.
like my PR is down to like 7,200. But if I were to, and it's like multis, we always love to like do like the little like math games, like, oh, if I do that and if I do that, then
Right.
I'll get that many points and whatnot. So I think that like and there's something called like your super score where you take your
All your
PR
PRs.
every
Yeah.
single event. Um, I don't know personally what my super score is, but I'm pretty sure that if I were to have done well in pole vault and shot put and
Right.
thrown at least like 50 meters in javelin,
Right.
then I'd be closer to like past 76, closer to 78.
Right. Yeah. So that puts you in the ballpark, right? So it gives you something to shoot for. And, knowing that all of your PRs, if you were to have a meet like that, gets you there, right? And then there's just the whole getting faster and stronger thing because speed is such a huge part of everything you're doing. And then certain events are just killer events, right? It depends like how much you get for each increment of improvement, right? A tenth of a second in 100 meters. How does that work? Hundreds of seconds, I'm sure they've probably broken the tables down to. So, you have to, I'm sure, just to break ties. And then,
Yeah, like every bar
football.
in like high jump or pole vault is like 67 points or something
Yeah.
around there. And so
Yeah.
it's like if you like are like 2 bars down from somebody else, that's 130 points.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge, right? That's why, Dan retired after no hiding at the pole vault because he opened too high, right? I think he opened at like 14.6, whatever the metrics is. And he no hided. I remember watching it going, what? And then I'm like, well, why would you quit? And they're like, dude, you just can't make up that many points, And I'm like, well, how do you know? What if he PRs in every event? Like you say,
Yeah.
what if he does like this radical thing? So,
Well, I mean, with pole vault being the eighth event and only having 2 more events to go, it's a pretty hard to
pretty
come
hard to
back.
ask. Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing if it happened right away, right?
But to answer your question about like Olympic dreams,
Mhm.
yes, the goal is to go to the Olympics. My plan is to shoot for the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles
Right.
because after this year of college, I'm gonna leave for 2 years to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and
Okay.
then come back and resume my athletic career.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that works out pretty well. Right. And then, where are you going to serve that mission?
I currently don't know.
Don't
Uh,
know. Still in the
Yeah,
future.
I like just started my papers the other day.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, that's awesome. You're gonna go serve and then 2 years standard, come back. You'll be how old when you come back?
Well, let's see, I'm 20 right now, so I'll be 22.
22. And
22, 22 and a half.
you'll have how many years left at Texas A&M?
Uh,
More?
Technically 3 if I take a red shirt the year that I come back.
Uh-huh.
But then again, that all depends on how well I'm able to stay in shape while I'm
Right.
on mission.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's gonna be easier said than done, but I'm sure if you really want to, you can do so. Um, yeah, I think this is just such an incredible time. Living here in LA, um, well, as they're getting ready. I mean, we really are only 5 years away now, or 4 years away from the next Olympics. Let's see, 24, 25, 4. Once it's over, it'll be 4. Um, Short time, because you get the infrastructure of everything out here, freeways, this, that, different venues. Like I haven't seen any of the plans yet. I'm sure they're going to run track and field at the Coliseum. Where else would you go in LA except the Coliseum? That's where they went in 32. That's where they went in 84. So I'm sure they're going to do it there again. There is a very beautiful stadium they just made out at Mount San Antonio College. Um, but I don't think it's big enough. I really love the place. I just don't think it's going to house enough people, to make it
Yeah.
worthwhile. But I do think
Yeah.
they want to make it an Olympic training center and or maybe a place for the Olympic trials in 2028. It's got Nike money flowing through there. And it's not that people don't like going up to Oregon, but it would be fun to have it at Mount Sac. Wow. But huge spotlight. Oh my gosh. And just, media centers, perfect, right? So you just got this huge opportunity and you've got mega sponsors and all kinds of money, and it's just going to be an amazing time. Lord willing, we're all still here. So you're training for the Olympics in 4 more years. Take a 2-year break. Might be nice. You could use it as recovery time for all the hard workouts you've been doing. Um, and then yeah, come back and hit the ground running. Pretty amazing. Now, short-term goals are heavily weighted towards athletics, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about what you're studying and what you're looking to do with that once your career as an athlete is over.
So, like I said earlier, I'm majoring in sport management and then I'm minoring in communication and getting the certificate in social media because that goes alongside with like my job for 12th Minute Productions.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what I'm doing personally, like through my personal content and through my personal content, I've been able to like shoot NIL deals for other athletes, both on the team and around Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so uh, ultimately, the goal is so growing up in a small town and I'm not having a lot of resources, but still being able to be successful, I'm able to see the value in opportunities and resources for communities that are not necessarily like the best because it's like you always have like down here in Texas like there's so many places where it's like if you're a high school athlete it's like you go to regular like school trainings and then you go to like you have a personal trainer that you
Sure.
work with and it's like that's really big down here in the South from what I've been able to learn. It's like it's like college but individualized in
Yeah.
high school. And I feel like specifically up in Idaho, they haven't quite gotten there yet. And
Right.
so I want to be able to help bring a facility back up to Idaho to not only give back to the next generation, but to also give back to the community that helped bring me to where I am today. And plus, Idaho has mountains. I grew up with the mountains. I love the mountains.
Right.
I kind of hate how flat it is down here in Texas,
Right.
but
Yeah. Well, I love hearing that. It's a great goal. Like you said, you're serving the community, you're paying back, which is awesome. With passion for, the sports that you grew up in. And yeah, it's amazing. Like you said, for Texas, I'm sure my brain is just picturing, huge football state, a hotbed of talent every year. I mean, if you don't go recruit in Texas for football, you're crazy, right? And basketball and track, anything you want to recruit for. I don't know if soccer's big there yet. I know it's a big football state. I don't know about soccer or rugby or one of those, but there's just a lot of athletes there. It's kind of silly. There's Florida, there's Texas, there's California. Everybody knows about that, and then all through the South, I'm sure. It's not just Texas, but Texas is huge. So, and then football there is crazy in high school, right? So you've got, like you said, you can have great resources at a school, but then those parents that are aggro, are going to be like, yeah, not only that, but I need my son or my daughter needs a private trainer too. And, to be honest, that's a competitive industry, with a lot of former athletes and, coaches and everything else that are outstanding at what they do. They're outstanding as athletes and they're outstanding coaches. And they're like, hey, you can make some pretty serious cash doing that, helping athletes. And now with the floodgates opening with this NIL stuff, if I'm a coach, well, I am. I'm start, working for these guys and saying, hey, let's work out some kind of a deal here because, you're going to be improving working with me, and based on those improvements, I think I should get a little piece of that pie because you're going to be making money, off of learning from me. So, maybe less money up, maybe less money up front and more money loaded into performance, packages at the end, saying, hey, if you get paid X for this, anything in there included, right? Commercials, performance bonuses, breaking record bonuses, that kind of stuff, right? So it depends on the sport. You really have to know how that works. And I'm sure that landscape is just exploding right now. All I hear on sports radio is the fact that they really need to regulate it, and everybody knows that the NC2A just has not one clue of how to even start that job. Because if you want to talk about opening up Pandora's box, there's like whoosh, all the genies ran out and they're just running around making deals, like when you're Eli Manning's kid, or who was it? Cooper Manning, right? The one Manning brother that didn't play pro ball but was really good. His son was the number one quarterback in all of high school football, right? Before last year, and
Oh,
came to
Arch Manning.
Texas. Yeah, went to Texas, right? And everybody's, I mean, I don't know anything about it. I don't know one number involved, but I'm willing to bet he's making at least $1 million and has not played one down in college football yet. Last year as a freshman, did not see the field, right? So you're like, A, if I'm paying all that money, I want to see him on the field. And B, who is good enough to keep him on the bench? And C, is he going to make any money next year if he wasn't good enough to play last year? So there's all these questions that we're dying to know. But yeah, I think you picked, I'm jealous again of you, Landon, because you seem to be really on top of stuff. When I got to UCLA, I had people ask me, what are you gonna do with a kinesiology major? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just taking it because it's interesting to me. I like the biomechanics. I like that stuff, the physics of what it is that you and I do, as athletes. But how that fit into a career and everything was very fuzzy at best. Like I had people that back in the day, it was always like, do you want to be a trainer? And by trainer, they mean someone working in the athletic training room. And I was like, no, 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 not what I'm interested in at all. And I'm still not, but the field has exploded into so many different directions because, here in this country, especially, and, television money and everything else, I mean, it's just kind of silly how competitive that industry is and how much money is flowing through it and how everybody's willing to fight to the death for that money. It's like these TV contracts for football are just ridiculous. I remember hearing the other day that the worst NFL owner will make $400 million from the TV contracts, and that the payroll cap is 220. So they're almost making twice as much money as they can legally spend on their teams. And that's before any home dates or any ticket sales or any merchandise or any of that stuff. So minimum, they're going to make $200 million, which they've got to pay coaches and stuff. But, I remember hearing a thing like a big pie that said out of that 200 million, there's only a tiny bit that's going to go towards coaches and, whoever you have to pay during football season and all that. And like you said, if you've got 9 home dates on a 17 game schedule, right? 2 preseason games, you might have one more. You get 10 home dates. If you're in the playoffs, you get a couple more. I mean, how many millions is that every time? It's just kind of silly. And that money is just like sitting there, and people are just like, man, your football life is short, so you got to take advantage of it while you can. So Landon, this is amazing. I could talk to you for another hour. Um, let's stay in touch seriously about let me know if there's anything when you're saying you're not sure which arm style you're using, how to get your arms ready as you're going in the jump and all that. I'm happy. That could be an aside. If you want me to edit it out, I will. I could just say that, to you. Because I'm a technician, first of all, and surprisingly, now that I've been teaching for a lot of years, it has seeped its way into my coaching so that there's times I feel like being a teacher has helped me get some ideas across more than it would have if I'd have just been a coach all those years. I found some things out the hard way. Most of the stuff I found out has been in the lab. So, a lot of the drills were just ideas on how to try to fix something that I was seeing, um, and then, the study in arm styles to me is kind of like, it sounds like me, your expertise in the pole vault for one of your four events that you dominated in high school. But when if you were to break down the pole vault, I would be the one listening to you. For instance, I vaulted in high school. And I think I went 11-6 and we didn't have a coach either. But I was like, I picked up a few things. And when I was at UCLA, I used to listen to Anthony Curran all the time. And I, would watch the pole vaulters. And so I know enough to be a little bit dangerous, you know what I mean? But nowhere near any kind of proficiency. I recognize some of the verbiage when you guys are talking, but like my knowledge of how to change poles, for instance, I keep telling Curran, I'm like, look, because I'll walk up and I'm listening to Anthony Curran tell his athletes, and he's like, "Oh, you blew through that pole, so let's do this. I want you to move your handhold, a little bit farther back, but we move closer. We're gonna do this. What I'm not even making the right example, I know, but there's so many terms that were coming out of his mouth, and it's like listening to another language, right? So I'm just like going,
Yep.
okay, wait, what? He wanted to move two steps back, two handholds up, change poles, and my brain is like hopelessly lost. And I've got a relatively good understanding of why all those things would be happening. But I still, as far as practical experience goes, and I think back and I'm like, when I was at UCLA, I was a freshman. Anthony Curran was a brand new coach in 1982. It was his first year. He had just graduated in the spring, in the summer or whatever. At the end of the spring was his last NC2A competition. And then the very next fall, he's the new pole vault coach. And so that was 1982. It is now 2022. So that's 42 years later. So he's been coaching all that time. So I'm sure you figure it out after a while, right? um, but yeah, anyway, as far as high jumping goes, first of all, let's just throw this out there because now that we've talked, I want to pimp for you and promote you. So, send me if you want a bunch of videos. I did one. I don't know if you know Lexi Keller. Do you know Lexi, the heptathlete?
I probably recognize her by I recognize faces, not so much names.
Right. Yeah. If I sent you something, you might recognize her. She's working for a video analysis company or a software firm that does video stuff, which is really kind of neat. On form or something like that. And anyway, after she actually approached me about this video stuff for her business. And then when I saw her stuff on Instagram, I was like, oh, this is, and then we put together a real nice reel for her. And, she's a high level, Olympic trial qualifier, that kind of thing. And so we did a nice reel. So anyway, I'd love to do one of those for you and, show you off and help promote you as you're going down this road of mastering all these different disciplines. My brain, pardon me, I've got some kind of good cold going on. But before I feel like I just steamrolled it over you because I got so excited about a bunch of stuff that you talked about. Is there anything that you have on your mind? Anything you want to bring up while we hopefully have all these young decathletes out there that are hanging on our every word.
Um, I would just say that I feel like most people who are interested in the decathlon, they feel like they need to understand everything like by the snap of the fingers. And I feel like that's how it is for most young athletes, but it's like they need to understand that like the college athletes who are competing right now, they are still learning and trying to figure out things every single day. Professionals are still learning and trying to figure out things every day. So it's okay if you don't necessarily understand like what to do or like what's going on. The biggest thing for them is to just work hard and to just have a good and positive attitude about it, because a lot of times like as a young athlete you can get down on yourself really easily for like coming into a meet and you're just like, okay, I have to do this, I have to do that and that, and it's like you don't perform to your unrealistic expectations.
Right.
You get discouraged on yourself, and then you start to lose motivation. When it's like in college, it kind of like helps shift your mindset of like, yes, I'm not going to perform my very best every single weekend, but I'm going to learn something new every single time I compete.
Yeah.
Because how Coach Henry puts it is, every single one of these meets until conference and nationals is just a rehearsal. It honestly doesn't matter, like,
Until it matters. Yeah.
yeah, like it doesn't matter if you like break the school record at the first meet and whatnot, because the training is set up for you to peak at the right times.
Right. Yeah. That's a tough one. Learning the whole thing about the grind. I remember, when we were training all that hard during the fall, and part of my brain was like, when are we going to jump? Didn't jump for a long time. And then even when you did jump, you just didn't feel any pop because your legs are so tired. You're 5 sets of 8, the weight room, full squats, and all that stuff we're doing, and it really takes it out of you. So that's part of it. The other aspect I really liked about what you said, Landon, was and I've had to do this with some of my jumpers. I have a lot of kids at my school that they're very highly motivated, a lot of parents involvement, and kind of they're perfectionists, and even though they're just learning something for the first time, if you tell them something, they're just like, they start to analyze, and they're like, they're getting ready to go and they start to run. They go, oh, I wasn't swinging my arms right. And I'm like, because I'm a technical guy. And I said, hey, I want you to pick your arms up and do this. So like, oh, I wasn't doing that. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. But before you go, picture yourself doing it and then go. Like, let me analyze. You go and we'll figure out what happened after. Like if you're trying to self-analyze while you're doing it, you're going to be hamstringing yourself because that just doesn't work. I'm here to tell you. I always tell them the story of, you and I both played football. So, and you've played a lot of the positions I played too, but you played, say you're an outside backer, say you did start as a free safety, say you started as a center on the offensive line, there's been weirder flips, but you get someone who maybe has never played there before, but the coaches all of a sudden, maybe out of necessity, maybe somebody got hurt. You say, hey, did you ever play backer before? No. Well, you kind of look like a backer, so guess what? You're there, and you stick them on the other side of the line, and you're like, now this is our base, what we cover. We run a 4-3, right? 2 corners, 2 safeties, and you're the middle backer. So, you're the mic. You go, now in this coverage, you got and you can watch their heads spinning around, right? When we run this coverage, you got this, you got this, you got that. When they do this, you got A gap. When you got this, flow goes away, you got B gap. You got all these different things. Okay. Watch the pulling guards. We want you to read this guy and all this stuff. So you're sitting there and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you call the huddle. This guy's going, okay, wait, I was just a center a minute ago. And you're like, going, okay, break. You get out there and you can see him just sitting there like just a world of hesitation, right? No idea. And so here comes the back in motion. And all of a sudden everybody starts screaming some color. And we're switching to cover 0 or whatever your code words are so that you're in man now and this and that. Everything starts to happen and they're just like rooted to the spot. It's like, no. And then you blow the whistle, you start yelling, and go, hey, that was run. You got to fill A gap, and it's like, man, you talk about learning curve and how over analysis and just thinking through everything is paralyzing, right? Well, after the end of a couple of weeks, what happens? A guy goes in motion, they're yelling out a name or a color. They see somebody do something that triggers them to go, this has got to be run, and they're filling a gap. And how does that happen? It's just like repetitions, man. Like you said, you got to work hard, you got to put in the reps. You're going to get better. Might not all happen in one day, like you're saying. It's going to take some hard work and, keep going along, keep grinding through it, but things are going to speed up, and I keep telling them, I go, look, you can't make it perfect by analyzing it before you throw it out there. I said, I don't know what it is like to be an artist or to be anything else where you're creating some output that everybody else can see. But literally in athletics, you can't fix it before you throw it out there. It's like you can try to picture it, you can try to make it as pretty as you want it to look on that particular rep, but you got a lot of things to learn. So that's why I just tell them, I go, hey, rule number one for me is whatever we're doing, do it as fast as you can handle, So I'm giving you a one-step approach. So get your arms back and take a fast step, don't walk. And then after that, we'll hammer it out. So yeah, I like it. Good words of wisdom from Landon. All right, bud. It's getting out there. It's 8:19. You're a couple hours behind me, you said?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
10:19 right now.
Yeah, well, you're past your bedtime, young man.
Yeah. Wait, here, wait. I have a question I wanted to ask you.
Go ahead.
For high jump, I don't think it's well, like I obviously have like an issue with my arms,
Mhm.
but I feel like I have more of an issue with my plant leg. Um, what's a cue that you have to like lock out that leg? Because an issue that I'm having is like I'll like plant it hard and I think that I'm like I compress it more than I should.
Right.
I bend my knee and then I'm trying to jump with it
Right. Right.
instead of just using it as a fulcrum.
See, that's there you're getting into the crux of a lot of arguments too, because for some power jumpers, they can bend that leg and still come off of it. For someone who's more speed oriented, they're going to just, like you say, want to hit with a straight leg, and everybody wants to hit with a straight leg. Your knee's going to bend. You can't lock your leg, as you know. If you did lock it completely, then you just get a shock wave that would go right up and through your hip, and you like, boom, that would stop it there. You're going to flex. That's where you start working on joint stability, right? The ability to capture that and then get back to that straight line as quickly as you can, right? Because I don't know if you ever seen that demonstration of the guy who's, I believe, a Japanese scientist throwing the stick at the ground. And it's this demonstration, it's like a weighted stick about 2 or 3 meters long. Well, 3 meters too long. Probably not even 2 meters, maybe a meter and a half. But it's taped up on one end and it's kind of to represent the human body. It's just a straight
Uh,
stick. It throws it at the ground like a javelin. It hits and it bounces up over like 7.6 or something. And when you're watching the demonstration, like, oh, and then they superimpose a picture of Stefan Holm, who's a 5'11" white guy from Sweden who's jumped 7'11", and he's all body lean angles, right? He's leaning back, like, and they superimpose it on the stick. You're like, oh yeah, that angle right there. And he goes up and he goes over and and it was a straight leg, like you're mentioning, and all that. So it's like, okay, he's another single armor, which I find interesting. So it's something that I've studied in a lot of ways as far as looking at it and going, hey, what is the key issue here is I got to be able to get off that leg quickly, but I also need that step to get out in front of me, stop my momentum, and help me to transfer it up, right? If I put it down there too quick and it's not out in front of me, then I'm going to go right by it, and it doesn't help me at all, right? So you can take real fast, choppy steps, and if you're not leaning back and away from the bar, then that's not going to help you because you won't be on the ground long enough to make a change. So it's like it's got to be explosive, fast, out in front of you. That one of the things I can tell you, I think, is real important for that for me that I was taught by Baru Elias, who was my little Romanian coach out here at Long Beach City College for years. Great high jump coach. He coached Brian Stanton to the Olympics in 1988. He went to Seoul, Korea. He was a 7'8" jumper. So I got to work out with Brian quite a bit. Another guy named Dennis Lewis, who jumped 7'8 1/4, which is actually not a real height. It's a long story on that one. They measured it in feet and inches, and it was not a metric. But two 7'8" jumpers and myself, he taught us to go heel toe, heel toe. So the last two steps was you're on the balls of your feet running because nobody runs on their heels unless you're a distance runner. And unless your shins are killing you, right? You're like kind of heel toeing it the whole way because you don't want to hurt. But when you're really running fast at the bar, you'll see people are up on their toes and they're being athletes. But you can take those last two steps and cycle and do everything you need to. But if you go heel toe, I always call that flaps up. It helps you lean back just like an airplane would, right? So an airplane, you hear those hydraulics going, and it tilts the wings back, right before takeoff, and you feel yourself drop back and you're going up. Same way I was taught with the heel toe, heel toe. So that's one thing I think will really help because it's difficult to do that when you're on your toe. A lot of people hit flat or even toe on their second to last step. And so all of a sudden you got to try to lean all the way back. And you'll see people do that, but they're still forward. So even though their heel is back, it'll slam that foot into the ground. And I think like you're talking about, when it slams that foot in the ground, it's much more likely to break the knee joint, not hurt it, but it'll cause
Yeah.
it to bend more and therefore cause your time on the ground to be too long. And everybody's had that sensation when you come up to a big jump and you just decide you're just going to give it more, right? You can give it more power. And sometimes that results in both lowering down, bending forward, which is always a death move, I call it, and, bending that leg too much. And if I'm forward with a deep leg bend, I'm not going to be able to get out of that position, So,
Yeah.
as far as a cue goes, I would say the heel toe is a good one for me. And sometimes, it really is just preaching it, through video, just like keep comparing, keep going back there. And, sometimes it's hard if you've got a habit that's been ground in. It's one thing I've learned. I want to write a book. I don't know enough about the human brain, but I have been learning about how the way people learn by the way that I try to teach them things and how quickly they can or can't pick it up. And sometimes some of those old adages like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks or old habits are hard to break are really true, and it's sometimes you're trying to overcome something that is too ground in there. It's too from the first 5 jumps you can take sometimes in the high jump. There's times like, God, I wish I'd have got this guy before they just let him try it at this meet because he's got some talent, but man, that's a bad habit. And I got to get rid of that now, because I know he can get away with it now, but later on it's going to really hurt us. So,
Where,
sometimes that comes in there.
where it's kind of like if you do want to fix it, you have to break them all the way down and then restart from the ground
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. And that's another great point that you bring up there, because if you ever do get something like that in any of your particular events, I would recommend that. And in a way, when you say break down, you almost need to stop completely
Yeah.
for
Stop, take a break,
period of time. Yeah, where
let your
they
mind and
no
body
jumping, no nothing,
completely
and
reset.
try for a reset. Yeah, because and then when you come out, you do nothing like that. Like you immediately attack on a completely different technique, where this is how we're going to do this. If it was a certain arm style, for instance, or whatever, you just got to go, okay, man, we got to pretend that like that never happened, because even though you have hit the reset button, it's still in there. You know what I mean? And that was it. That was our interview with Landon Helms. Stay tuned here on Raise the Bar. We are finishing up this year with many of the podcasts that were done this last both spring, summer, and early fall. They're being produced and coming out, and then we will be starting a fresh slate next year. Please subscribe here on the YouTube channel if you would like to not watch and listen as you're driving around your car. You can find the Raise the Bar podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And what else? We have our Zoom classes still available. Go to my website. You can find us on Instagram. That is where I'm most heavily invested and do most of my advertising on there. We're going to be start putting out new content on the YouTube channel, videos, and more podcasts and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. A lot of things going on, and of course the season's heating up, and we will be starting indoor indoor stuff here pretty soon, which is really outdoor here in Southern California, but qualifying for indoor involves outdoor. So as there are very few indoor facilities, if any. But all right, so let's get going here. Thanks again to Landon Helms, and we're wrapping this up. So give us a follow and subscribe, and be paying attention for more content coming out soon here on Raise the Bar. Until next time, this is Troy Haines signing off. Have a great one. And since we're in the holiday season, Merry Christmas, have a Happy New Year, and we'll see if we get any more out after this. All right, until next time, take care.